Now when we look at the placement of the nephron in the medulla, we can have short nephron loops that are above the arcuate artery, or we can have long nephron loops that are below the arcuate artery. So if the arcuate artery and vein are located here, then all of the entire nephron is within the cortex. And this would be described as a cortical nephron. The entire nephron is found within the cortex. However, we can have a nephron whose capsule, Bowman's capsule is found close to the arcuate artery. All of the proximal convoluted tubules would be found within the cortex, but the nephron loop descends deep into the medulla. And then the distal convoluted tubule would come out and be found in the cortex as well. So we never find the capsule, the proximal convoluted tubule, or the distal convoluted tubule in the medulla. So our Bowman's capsule, our proximal convoluted tubule, our distal convoluted tubule are structures that are always and only found in the cortex.
What, those three?
If you see those on a histology slide, you will know that you're looking at the cortex of the kidney. Okay. As you can see here, the nephron loop and the collecting ducts could be found in either or both. So we have collecting duct, descending limb of the nephron loop, ascending limb of the nephron loop, those can be found in the cortex or in the medulla. And then we'll talk about the blood vessels. These blood vessels, the vasa recta, can only be found in the medulla as well. So these structures, the collecting duct, the loops of Henle, and the vasa recta, again, are those straight structures that give rise to that striated appearance of our pyramid. So if the loop extends down into the medulla, then this is identified as a juxtamedullary nephron, because the capsule is juxta or next to the medulla. So that's a cortical nephron. This would be a juxtamedullary nephron. And there's a purpose for these loops going down into the medulla that we'll talk about next week. You had a question, Rachel?
That was my question.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure if they're lazy, if they're mistaken, or if they're just confused, but in some views, notice how this distal convoluted tubule, here's our proximal convoluted tubule here, coming down, and then we have our distal convoluted tubule, and it should go right back close to our blood vessels like I drew over there. Many times, however, when the emphasis is on another factor such as this view, let's see, where am I? This one. Notice the distal tubule here is not anywhere near close to its location where it should be, near the open window of the capsule. This is anatomically incorrect. Because it's very important in the regulation of blood pressure and the regulation of sodium content that we have this straight tubule come and pass between these two blood vessels. Well, there are cells, as we say on Tuesday, that are sensitive to the sodium content of the filtrate, that interact with these blood vessels to change the rate of blood flow and the rate of pressure and thus the rate of filtration. So they have to be in that location. Okay. All right, so those are the basic structures of the nephron, and again on Tuesday we'll go back and look at each one, its epithelia, the structure, and how it does its function. But let's look on page 10 at the blood supply, and it's well, page 8 actually shows the entire kidney with its blood supply. So I'm going to erase this and draw it again, just putting in the blood vessels. Okay? Otherwise, I have too much information on there, and nobody gets a point anything. So bringing blood into the kidney, each kidney is the renal artery, and that's about the thickness of my thumb. All right, so they're quite large. All of your blood flows through the kidneys about 5 times a day. All right, so it's doing this multiple times because you make about 180 liters a day of filtrate. You only have about 5 liters of blood in your body. So obviously we're pushing it across and then pulling it back in again to the body. We're pushing the water into the filtrate and then reabsorbing most of that. Because you make about 1.8 liters of urine. A liter being about 2 cups. Okay? So out of 180 liters of filtrate, you excrete about 1.8 liters of urine. So obviously we're doing a lot of reabsorption. Okay?
Even if you're not,
You'd be sitting on the toilet with an IV hooked up to you
even
the
if
whole
you're
time.
not staying hydrated, you're
Yeah.
still filtrating no matter what.
All right, so coming into and through the hills here, we have the renal artery. And it may break down into several branches before it actually passes into the kidney. Let me make this a little bit fatter for realism. So renal artery. And then running between each pyramid, as you can see here, are interlobar arteries. Now, the first branches off of the renal arteries are segmental arteries, but I don't require that you know those. And then from each segmental artery, we give off an interlobar artery that is going to travel between each pyramid. So lobes are larger than lobules. So this would be interlobar. That would be these right here. Then each lobar artery is joined to form the arcuate artery.
What was the
So
first one?
These are segmental,
Segment.
and these are renal. I'll write segmental down, but I'll put it in parentheses. It's not on your lab list. Then the interlobar arteries. And in connecting at the base of each pyramid have the arcuate arteries. So going back to the model, this is one of our models that we have in lab. Here's the renal artery. This is looking from the